Today on In the Know, the state of the art in warehouse automation. We're going to hear about the latest in technology, people, and processes. Here is what our experts had to say. What are the big pain points you see these companies experiencing as they struggle with their WMS system?
It's across the board. And let me tell you about some of the more frequent experiences, the pain points that companies continuously come or frequently come to us for. For instance, changing RF messages, right? With a lot of WMS systems, the RF message that is included with the system is hard-coded. So everybody uses the same message stream, every company for every situation. A lot of companies would like to personalize that, right? But it's very difficult for them to do that, or expensive for them to do that. They have different types of workforces. Okay, the requirements change, and so the RF messages that they would like to use, they would like to adapt them to their workforce. More experience, maybe you have some temps that have come into work, and if you had the ability to change and personalize those RF messages, you could better address, the challenges you have with a very demographically different workforce. That's one of the ones that we see a lot. If you think about in a warehouse situation, those areas that are most dynamic, another one that comes to mind is packing. Particularly in an e-commerce world and in a value-added services world where customers are demanding more and more, and companies want to distinguish themselves by delivering more and more, and by personalizing the way that they deliver shipments to their customers. Whether that's different inserts, whether that's different promotional items, maybe it's some personalized packaging or wrapping or whatever. This is a very dynamic area, and for companies to keep track of that, a lot of times for companies to address those specific needs, they do it outside of the system. They do it manually. So it's a pain point for them because anything that they're doing outside of the system is going to be more prone to errors, and it's going to be it's going to take more time.
What is Industry 4.0?
So Industry 4.0 is the fourth industrial revolution, and at ClearPath we believe that industrial revolution, when we look back in about 15 or 20 years' time, will have started in 2015. And what it is the introduction of new automation technology and interconnected devices inside of industrial centers with the purpose of increasing operational efficiency. The excitement comes from the potential impact that it has on the market and on the industry itself. There are some estimates that say that Industry 4.0 will impact operational efficiency by up to 80%. And that potential is that step forward in technology adoption is why everyone's so excited about it and why it gets its own name.
Well, so we see innovation across the board, of course, right? So at the task level, what's the operator working with to get the information, confirm what they're doing? Certainly, and at the facility level, how are we making facilities smarter, more visible, and even extending that out into the broader supply chain across the board. What we see at a plant level, of course, is get everything connected and everything visible. And a big part of that is moving to what we call smarter environments. And so our CTO, Tom Bianculli, likes to talk about, to differentiate the idea of systems of reality that are constantly on, sensing what's really happening in the plant or the warehouse, as opposed to a system of record. So WMS, right, very transactional. It's a system of record for the warehouse, but a system of reality is saying, okay, where exactly in real time are my people? Where are my assets? What is the status of a trailer load, for example? We have a new solution called Trailer Load Analytics, which we have a fixed appliance essentially monitoring a trailer that might be, let's say, being floor loaded. And with a combination of video and depth sensors and software, we can not only monitor in real time the capacity available in that trailer, we can monitor the effectiveness of the load technique. We can monitor the ergonomics of the loader and how they're using it, and we can mobilize that information so that the dock manager has in the palm of his or her hands all the information he or she needs to manage a very large loading operation. So that's just one example. Real-time locationing is expanding significantly with new technologies like Bluetooth Low Energy, integrating other technologies like passive RFID and of course active RFID technologies as well to solve those locations. And it's really about making the plant or warehouse continuously visible, whereas in the past we just had transactions.
Because people want to move away from a batch type of environment. Many warehouse management systems work with the concept of creating waves. And what's a wave? A wave is nothing more than a batch of orders that have been basically allocated based upon rules. So for example, I want to ship all my same day orders different than all my next day ground orders. I could simply set a rule that actually parses out the actual order profile to say same day versus next day. The challenge is what happens when all of a sudden an order drops in at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and now I need to re-dynamically allocate. Well, guess what? The batch is gone. And so the batch is now gone, where a warehouse execution system comes in, at least in my opinion, it really moves the world from being batch to really dynamic. And so now you're not only is it moving from batch to dynamic, but you're now resequencing and reprioritizing how that equipment actually operates that particular order. And so now the WES is actually really the control, the brain, the true brain behind what's going on your automation. So some differences in terms, again, WMS, WES, and WCS type systems. But quite frankly, a lot of it is value because you're really moving to a more dynamic world versus a batch world. And in the world of omni-channel, why is that so important? It's because, you know, if you want to compete with Amazon, you want to compete with Uber, and from a logistics perspective, right or wrong, things are moving to same day. People expect things to be delivered same day. That's where it's going. So if I'm working in a batch world, right, where I'm batching up 25,000 orders before I can release them versus dynamically allocating an order one at a time, I'm basically at a disadvantage because in batch equals queue equals more time. And so it's all about, right or wrong, compressing cycle time and creating a machine language that's learning to move us from batch to dynamic.
RFID is a wonderful tool, so we use it in various different data collection methods. For returnable containers in particular, one of the abilities we get with RFID is to read lots of things all at once without the need for any type of visual indication. So we don't need a line of sight in order to read a barcode, or a human doesn't have to look through a pallet to be able to determine how many units are on that pallet. So we can take a group of returnable containers, pass them through a read zone, and with that technology, we'll be able to read hundreds of tags at once, basically counting every single unit that's on that pallet as it drives through. So as an example, unique identifiers are issued to every single RFID, every single returnable transport unit that's on that pallet. So we can tell which units came in, where they came from, who they were sent to, and be able to keep the inventory accurate with the technology. In past, we could not even really count returnable containers very well. Because of the possibility of them being collapsed or nested together, people would take a guesstimate or an approximation of how many units came back. So nobody had a good way of managing them without that technology. Now today, we can actually manage literally thousands and thousands of units all at once as they're moving in and out of a facility without any human interaction. So what we found is from an industry, we're actually seeing significant movement in that regard, because they didn't have any other real mechanism without it being heavy labor intensive.
I think there's tremendous opportunity to leverage robots inside the four walls to eliminate a lot of unproductive walking. I mean, it's sort of taking a conveyor concept and putting it on steroids, right? So conveyors, an older technology, provided a basis for providing a lot of transportation through the warehouse of goods and the like, but robots are even simpler. They provide a great deal of flexibility. So the analogy I like to use is conveyors are a lot like a subway system in Manhattan. Very good at transporting 500 people from 42nd Street down to Battery Park, right? But really, to think about the use of robots, we think about it in terms of something like an Uber inside the four walls, being able to manage and deploy very small, very modular, forms of transportation that can go anywhere at any time for any reason. And I think that's really where you start to unlock the value of robots. Well, I think you're going to see companies like ourselves who leverage sort of a simple platform and really bring the value up into the software. So most people would think of robots as being the physical device, but I think the real innovation's occurring in the software, where somebody can say, take a simple platform but really drive value in that through the use of software. So somebody like Locus, who really understands the domain, is focused on delivering a solution that delivers very specific value inside the four walls. And the bulk of that is really up in the software.
Let's talk about the benefits that robotic solutions can bring to distribution and fulfillment. What would you say they are?
Yeah, so robotics can help the retailers in fulfillment to fill that labor gap. Robots have not traditionally been able to do a lot of the tasks that human operators can do, but what we're seeing now is the advancement with computer vision, computer computational power, advanced materials and grasping that are allowing the robots to actually do a lot of the tasks that have been traditionally only capable by a human. And so we're seeing that robotics fills that labor gap that exists with the retailers. Now, and there's also some of the robotic technology that's coming out, that's like collaborative robotics, that are helping to address the cost challenges that come with an integration of a robotic solution. Collaborative robotics are interesting and they solve a need. They're not necessarily the end-all be-all solution, but certainly they serve the need to be able to drive some of the costs down.
In 2008, during the downturn in the economy, really forced a lot of companies, because of the pressures they were under, to really relook at their businesses and to see how they were spending their money and how they were utilizing the resources because of the severe downturn. It really put a lot of pressure not only on customers and manufacturers, but it also put a lot of pressure on the manufacturers of industrial equipment as well. As you know, the industrial market went down about 50%, 50 to 60%. The construction market went down close to 70%, so a lot of pressure everywhere. So what happened is, because of the downturn in the economy, some trends really started to emerge. There was a kind of an open door to technology to really drive some of these trends, and one of those trends had to do with wireless data communications, or what we say in the material handling market, telematics or telemetry, where you can communicate data from an actual asset or a fleet of lift trucks to a central point location. Automation, as we know, in the material handling workplace has been around since the 50s. And there was a lot of drivers that made automation in what we call AGVs, or automatic guided vehicles, really make sense in the material handling market, whether it was a manufacturing environment or a distribution and center environment. Those drivers for success in that AGV market where there's no operator on it, which means there's no paycheck that you have to pay. An AGV doesn't call out sick. An AGV doesn't have holiday hours. An AGV doesn't need health benefits. So a lot of good drivers that made sense in the marketplace back several decades ago. Leading up to today, those value drivers still exist, but the flexibility we have today with the technology behind navigation systems, as well as the complexity with lift trucks, makes lift trucks almost an AGV without the navigation system. So what's happening now is a lot of lift truck manufacturers, Hyster being one of them, are developing our lift trucks to be technologically advanced to the point where we can start partnering with companies that have navigation systems to help AGVs in that operation.
So we've seen our customers look to embrace touchscreen technology across the enterprise, whether it's for managers or whether it's for execution personnel. It's just much more intuitive. As we see the engagement in the facility be encouraged, as we see younger employees and younger workforce come into the mix, certainly an intuitive, graphical, touchscreen device is really the right way to drive capability into the hands of the personnel. The fusion of WMS and WCS is certainly a popular topic and something we've leaned into quite aggressively from the Manhattan perspective to make sure that we've got the right integration points, the right workflows worked out, so there's a clear understanding of what the WMS is doing and what the WCS should be driving from an end customer perspective.
Do you see a clear trend toward more automation, meaning fewer bodies in the warehouse, or not?
Yeah, we do. So certainly our perspective and our view based on talking with customers is that more and more automation is happening. the variable cost of labor and the labor shortage is driving more and more customers to implement an increased level of automation.
Well, you will see the ERP vendors with their WMS systems, and they will remain a very powerful force, very big presence, very big installed base. You will see some of the larger best-of-breed companies that continue to expand their platforms beyond WMS into planning, into other execution systems. You'll continue to see that. I think you'll see better, stronger system solutions for the mid-tier market. And I also, we like to talk about the systems of the future being less of the monolithic big WMS and being more of an app-based WMS where you can pick and choose apps and kind of sort of build your own personal system. You know, if you need a labor system, then you buy that app, right? If you need a different kind of wave management system, then you buy that app. If you don't need part of a traditional WMS system, then you don't have to buy that app. So, you know, we think we'll see companies offering an app type solution, and the customers will be able to personalize the solution to meet their needs.
It is the convergence of these technologies, it is the maturity of these technologies. So, you know, you've got your hype curve. We hear about this stuff like RFID, we heard about during the hype phase. Everyone's like, oh wow, this is going to be great. Well, it takes time to mature and deploy that technology, so now it starts to get into more of the productivity stage or curve where people are actually using it. So all of these technologies that you described, they come to mind because they came to mind during their hype phase. And then they kind of just went underground for a while.
That so-called trough of expectations,
yes,
where it dropped off and everybody got disappointed.
Exactly.
And then reality comes in and we start to see the true application beyond the hype.
Sure. Well, I think an interesting one that you can talk about, remember all the hype around Kiva a couple years ago? And then Amazon spent an extraordinary amount of money to buy Kiva. Well, I was just talking to Bruce Welty, who just founded a company called Locus Robotics. And he was one of the first, his 3PL was one of the first users of Kiva. And he was able to see the potential, but he was able to experience the limitations. Moving those pods around was very difficult. But he saw the potential of an autonomous robot in the warehouse that could carry the totes around to the various pickers. So now we're getting a human-machine interface where we're leveraging the machines to do what the machines do really, really well, which is run around the warehouse. And we do the things that a human does really, really well, which is picking the eaches and putting them into the tote. And now we're improving productivity by 30 and 40%. So, and the cost has come down greatly. You know, so now, instead of $100,000 a unit, we're seeing picking autonomous robots for $35,000 a unit. So think if you could hire an employee for less than $35,000 a year that worked 10-hour shifts with only an hour in between.
I think this technology that we're seeing in the warehouses, the way inventory is controlled, the way it is managed, is all part of a more sophisticated material handler. And in that respect, it is a more sophisticated job than it ever was.
You know, I think we are, the warehouse of the future is the continuous improvement of warehousing, material handling. You know, we can talk about education in a future episode, but education is evolving. The millennials are coming on board. Millennials, they wouldn't even think of not doing something on their smartphone. They wouldn't even think about not using omni-channel fulfillment. So all of these things lead to the future being now.
So there you have it, the latest intelligence in warehouse automation. Now you're in the know.